This AI stuff is maybe bigger than anything we've seen before in terms of major changes to how things work.
We're seeing AI models develop an update that is 100 times more powerful than the previous update. It's a completely new beast on every single update.
We've looked at what firms could be doing to get the foundations in place. What are the really cutting edge ones doing? What does that look like?
I think they predict 90% of Google code is going to be written by AI within the next year.
Wow. You can't talk about change in the accounting profession without touching on AI in 2025. So this week I'm speaking to Billie Mcloughlin, who's quickly becoming the residential expert of AI in the accounting tech space. We talk about the potentials, the pitfalls, the practical uses for practices, and the importance of a mindset shift if AI is going to be an asset rather than an enemy to you. So I'll hand over to Billie, where she's talking through her background and experience, and we'll go from there.
I'm Billie Mcloughlin. I am an ACCA qualified accountant, did my qualification straight from school. So I've been in the industry now for 16 years, which feels like a very long time. I was in practice just over 12 years and then moved to 2020 Innovation to be a practice consultant to help practices with their growth, whether it be profitability, whether it be team, and ultimately digital technology and artificial intelligence, which seems to have absolutely exploded and taken over quite a large chunk of my workload.
Yeah, you're quickly becoming known as the AI person in our space. I think it's fair to say with Friday AI that you run, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of noise with AI because it is so mainstream now. I really wanted to have a space that accountants could go to where less than sort of 8 minutes a week, they can just get the top line headlines and how it's actually applicable to the accountancy industry. Because unfortunately, you can read it all, but kind of think, okay, but so what? And how does that affect me? What does that mean for my practice? So the idea was to give that information, but without it being just full of fluff that's kind of unnecessary.
It's so hard to separate the wheat from the chaff, isn't it? Because there's so many cool things that you can do, and we're going through the sort of the toy revolution at the minute, aren't we? On LinkedIn, everyone's posting AI generated toys of themselves, which is great in some senses to see people experimenting and playing with a thing, but then it's kind of what use of that, what relevance is it?
Mhm.
And I think that's some of the challenge, isn't it, with AI? Some of it's just sort of fluff and fun, and that sort of obscures sometimes the things that are actually really revolutionary, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's one I try and take the positive in quite a lot of these situations, and one of the things I keep taking from this image generation thing, which is where these dolls are coming from, and I think I've seen people turning their pets into humans as well, which I just don't feel like I could do because I don't know if I'd look at my dog the same way again. I'm like, I don't know what you would like look like as a human. I don't ever want to know. Um, but one of the things I'm taking as a real big positive is that when it comes to kind of prompting and asking these large language models questions, if it's just in a way of asking it to give you a written response, quite often people say, "Oh, it's not giving me the response I want it to." But if it's an image, people can actually visualize what is missing from the image and therefore start to tailor their prompts, and they have a bit more confidence with giving it feedback and kind of tweaking it in the way that they want it to then give them the response.
Mm.
And so although it is very gimmicky, it's actually behind the scenes quite educational because people doing that with images will help them with their prompting for useful use cases.
Definitely, definitely. So one of the things that comes up a lot is whether AI is a threat or not, particularly in professional services like accounting. And you've got some very vocal camps saying, no, it's ridiculous, it will never replace accountants. You've got some other camps saying accountants are doomed, and then you've got some in the middle. But I was thinking about this, and from one point of view, if you imagine that there are every year so many hours worth of work that are available to the accounting profession, right? There's only so many businesses, there's only so much that needs doing. So let's say it's 1 million hours or 1 million person hours a year just to have a number. The question is then, well, do we think AI is going to reduce that number or increase it? And I think it's a very difficult business case to make that AI is actually going to increase that number.
Mhm.
So therefore, if the number of available work hours is going to reduce, surely that's a threat, unless accountants and bookkeepers figure out a way to grow that pie and make more work available in the market, or grow the market a little bit, which typically they're not tend to do massively well over the last couple of decades. That's just something I was mulling over earlier on. Like, what do you think to that? Do you agree with that, or have I gone off into the wrong way with that? Do you think?
No, I think your perspective is spot on with that because it's a really great way of visualizing it in respect of if if we do reduce the amount of hours that we spend, then in which case do we need less people and therefore that's when accounts become redundant. If we increase the amount of hours, what does that look like? Because we're not increasing that on those tasks that AI can now do. We're increasing
Yeah.
that in different aspects. So now we need to start looking at training. How does that look? And I think the issue there is it's the governing bodies, as I say, I'm ACCA qualified, your ICAW, your AAT, your ICB. How are they now looking at training? Are they doing a better job at teaching accountants and bookkeepers to do advisory services? Are they giving them the confidence to do it? And also, it's got to be said, like we need to be able to sell. And accountants are
Mm,
notoriously bad at selling because I know so many really intelligent accountants, and because they're so intelligent, they just see it as second nature. They know what they're doing, and it's quite easy to just be like, "Well, a client could do it themselves, so I don't want to upsell." And it's like they couldn't, and they wouldn't want to.
yeah.
So it's more than just if we are going to increase the hours, where does that go, and how do we train the next generation to be competent in it and confident in it?
I think there's a whole other level of this compliance is dead argument, which compliance is dead has been bandied about for 40 years, probably more, and it still hasn't died. But I just wonder if AI actually presents a more credible threat and risk to that, and therefore, like you're saying, advisory is becomes more important. Although I sort of hesitate saying that because it's such a cliche now.
Mhm.
But I wonder if it is different this time.
So interestingly, I had a conversation with a firm in January, and they said they've had the busiest January ever
Wow.
because of the amount of queries they were getting from people that had asked AI a question. So it's kind of the new Dave down the
Interesting.
pub of, well, ChatGPT told me that I can claim back my dog food for my chihuahua because it's a security dog type thing. Um, and so it's interesting to see that the challenges that we're facing as a profession are actually changing alongside it. So a challenge that I definitely hadn't foreseen in December that then presented itself in January was super interesting. And I think we kind of need to acknowledge things like that as well. And this is where educating our clients is really important. So to answer your original question about it being an opportunity and a threat, it's both because
Yeah.
there's this threat of incorrect information, there's the fraud threat, there's the deep fake threat that comes with it. But if we have the right attitude to be aware of that and we train our teams and our clients on it, then we can really take advantage of the opportunities. Y- yes, compliance is dead, and we've heard that for a long, long time. We've heard from some of the big four saying, like, you know, their compliance work is slowing down, and that probably will filter down. It will just be a really slow burn, I think, if I'm honest.
So I think the one thing we can say with certain is there's uncertainty, right? We don't know how this is going to pan out, and all of the things that we've just said there that will evolve and, like you said, probably be a slow burn. So for practices that are looking at this now and thinking, how do I get ahead of this? How do I at least make sure I've got a good foundation to respond to however this works? What are the things that they could be looking at that will put them on a good footing as this sort of stuff continues to evolve?
Well, the number one thing would really be a mindset shift, in my opinion, because so from when I started in the industry to now, the thing that got me into digital was the cloud revolution. Moving all our clients onto the cloud. Became quite a big part of my job, and I loved doing it because I could see the benefits. I could see the changes it made to the clients. I could see the changes it made to the cash flow from our practice point of view.
Mm,
But I think because we've gone through that huge shift not that long ago, a lot of practices are seeing the AI revolution in a similar way and being like, yeah, I'll catch up later on. I'm a bit busy right
mm,
now. With the cloud, that was totally acceptable. It wasn't going anywhere. It was easy to do. With AI, my messaging is to just get your first step on the ladder because if you've missed the train, you can't just get it at the next stop. You have to stay at your station until the next train comes because you you need to know from the foundation up. You need to know the security risks. You need to know the prompt engineering that we just discussed. You need to know kind of like the best use cases. If you try and jump on further down the line, you're going to miss some of that and therefore use incorrectly, and that's where the danger comes. So I think that's the first point, is to have that mindset shift.
Mm,
And also, and again, going back to that talent piece of, we've got all these people coming through into the industry. They've got the option now to go and do really cool jobs. Like the jobs now that are on offer for people that are interested in this type of space is super interesting, miles more than when I got into the profession. And if we want to track them into practice, we need to be showing that we're allowing them to use AI. We want them to. We don't
mm,
want them doing monotonous jobs. We want to develop them as people. So you kind of have to get on it for the sake of the future talent as well. Um, in terms of like what they could do to start if they've not started, note takers always my first point of call. I think they're fantastic transcribers. Your team will see a massive benefit. The partner at my practice used to write in hieroglyphics. If I had a note taker that could have transcribed what he was saying for me, it would have saved me and many people in the office hours trying to read what he'd written. And then that way you build the excitement in your practice, people see the benefit, and then they're curious to know what's next. And then also keeping abreast of what's going on in your own practice and your own
mm,
software. So if you're already using products that are incorporating AI, having conversations with your tech vendors and saying, okay, how can I use that? How will it benefit me? These are my current workflows. What will this new AI enhancement change in those workflows for me? You don't need to run. It's the whole walk before you can run type thing.
yeah, absolutely. One thing just to come back to though, you've mentioned there that this is different to the cloud switch, right? Whereas at the cloud you could just wait a bit and then get going, whereas here you sort of, if you miss the bus, you're gonna get further and further behind. I'm just curious to know, why is that? Like, what's the distinction between those two big changes that means this one is you get left behind so much more quickly?
I would say when development happened with cloud, it was very, here's the next bit, here's the next bit, like step one, step
Okay.
two, step three. And that was how the development works. Because AI is so progressive, we're seeing AI models develop an update that is 100 times more powerful than the previous update. So that's
Right.
not just like the next step or a new feature. It's a completely new beast on every single update that it does. So for example, the last update that OpenAI did on deep research, if you didn't know how to use just the normal ChatGPT, even the free version, if you'd never ever opened that before, going straight into deep research would have you absolutely lost, bamboozled. You wouldn't get the most out of the product. But if you'd learned how to ask questions in the basic model first, you are well equipped to move forward a bit. So I think it's just the rate at which it's moving, because also I think it's Google. I think they predict like 90% of Google code is going to be written by AI within the next year.
Wow.
So if AI is writing itself and developing itself, let's not go into like the
Yeah.
iRobot side of things and how scary it could be. I mean, whoever thought it'd be a good idea to give AI access to the internet and allow it to speak its own language? Those people have watched far too much sci-fi. But because of that, it means that it can develop much quicker than a couple of humans that was maybe sat around discussing updates to some of the cloud products that we started using
Mm.
early on.
Interesting. And so it sounds like there needs to be a sort of an internal intellectual property being developed within firms of like how to use this and sort of building that foundation
Mhm.
so that you can then build upon that, I suppose, rather than what I used to do when I was doing my ACCA exam, which was just like I'll just cram it at the end. Like it feels like in this analogy, the exam would be twice as hard if you're going to study for it at the end as it would as if you did it at the beginning.
I think that's a perfect way of saying it. The longer you leave it, the harder it's going to get. So yeah, it's like studying for your exams with all the 23, 24 tax rates. Then by the time you sit your exam, you're in the new tax year and you've got
Yeah,
to kind of revisit it all.
crazy. Because I think that the temptation is to look at these little waves of innovation like computerization and cloud and AI. It's just another 10% more or another doubling or whatever. But it feels like from what you're describing, this AI stuff is maybe bigger than anything we've seen before in terms of major changes to how things work.
I would sort of put AI on the same level, if not more so than the internet. So the inception of the internet
Okay.
and how that was developed. And there's a guy called Gary V who does a lot of marketing stuff, and I've
Yeah.
listened to a lot of his podcasts. And he was really early. I think his dad had like a wine merchant, so super early he told his dad, "You need to be on Google, or you're gonna miss the boat." And everyone was like, "You're mad, you're mad. No one's looking on Google." And now, could you imagine not looking at that? Whereas I feel
Yeah.
like AI could actually cannibalize a search engine that,
Mm.
especially if you're probably under the age of 30, you've never known anything other than having access to Google.
Yeah. That is crazy. So if what's the equivalent of that though, right? So the equivalent of me building a website in the 90s when the web first came out, what's the equivalent of that now? So we've looked at what firms could be doing to get the foundations in place. What are the really cutting edge ones doing? Are they developing their own apps? Like what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of using artificial intelligence, and there's so many interchangeable words and acronyms and everything here. So we've got robot process automation, and people get a little bit confused. What I would say is, don't get bogged down in the detail of like what they actually mean, but more what
Yeah.
they can do. So a lot of the bigger practices who have the funding, they're developing their own internal AI assistants that can sort of assist anybody in the practice to, whether it's a trainee who wants to know the definition of depreciation, or whether it's a client that wants to know how to find the UTR number, they've got access to these assistants. The smaller firms are doing something similar by introducing chatbots because, again, very low cost, easy to run, and can have quite a good impact. Then you've got the ones that are developing like the proper RPA solution. So they've got bots just doing the work for them. And I would say as well, we've got agentic AI coming soon. So for those of you, well, it's already here, but I mean in the mainstream coming soon. So with the likes of the bigger firms who can afford to pay hundreds of thousands of pounds, I think, for example, Deloitte's going to be hundreds of thousands of pounds to create these agents. A
Right.
smaller firm probably can't do that, but we're seeing Microsoft, for example, develop a really great, almost like a drop down menu of how to create an AI agent. So when this happens, I would like you to
Okay.
do this. And it will be able to go into your emails and fetch data and read it and then populate where you need it to. They'll be able to, I've seen them already where they're running your computers for you. So where that feels like those are the really big companies and the ones with the big budgets, we'll see that filtering down in the next 12 months to smaller firms being able to create something similar.
And that was all this the thing with the cloud generator revolution, wasn't it? It was that democratization of those really high end tools
Mhm.
and making it available to everyone. So of course it makes sense that that will happen. But kind of listening to you speak there, like, I imagine that an amazing use case for agentic AI would be the onboarding process, because that typically in firms is really cumbersome, really time consuming at a point where they haven't really built anything yet, but you've got to go through KYC and all that sort of stuff. Do you see that as being a good use case for these sorts of things, or am I sort of
Mm,
off there?
no, it's the perfect one. It's probably one of the ones that I get asked the most of when I'm doing any tech consulting is how can we
Okay,
how can we improve our onboarding? Because it's a very thankless task. You feel like you're bothering the client and you don't usually get any money for doing that part of the job. So it's probably the worst part of doing anything in the practice. So if you could have something where, and we're seeing this already with auto population and the biometric tests, so that people can do the scan your face. They've got the mobile apps. They can take a picture of the driving license and it will populate. But once it's done that, if somebody could, if they had a bot that would then read that driving license and be able to populate a practice management system depending
right,
on what it is you're using. And this is what's going to be the beauty of the AI systems is when we are using products now, there isn't this one size fits all. The question I get asked all the time is, I just want an umbrella product that's going to do everything. And there is nothing on the market that does that. Despite the acquisitions we're seeing, nobody is integrating to that level. With the agentic AI that we're going to see, we'll be able to train them on our systems where they can log into the different programs and have access to them. There doesn't need to be an integration because you've essentially got a digital employee doing it for you. And onboarding is a great use case for that.
Fantastic. And God, there's so much here, and there's so many things to ask you about. But I guess one of the things that I'd be thinking if I was a practice right now is that there's all this opportunity, there's all these things that I could go and do. There's this looming threat that if I don't do anything, that it's going to get harder in future to actually get on the bus if I'm going to do it. And it sounds like that's not really going to be an option in future. Like, I'm going to have to do this, or I'm going to fall behind. Maybe where am I going to find the time to do this? Do I need to have a person dedicated to looking out for these changes, understanding what's going on and being on it? Or is there the potential that I could save enough time in other areas with AI and tools like that, that I can give myself the time back to stay on top of this stuff? Because it's a lot to keep on top of, right? Like you said, the development is just insanely fast.
Yeah, unbelievably. And I mean, I spend so much time reading, listening, watching all this stuff. Like pretty much every dog walk of mine is headphones in, listening to something, because I could research something on a Monday and by the Wednesday it's changed. For an accountant, we've got a million other things to be thinking about, and our clients come first.
Mm,
Because of that, one of the things that we have to do as practitioners is we have to be intentional. So if there is something that we want to implement, we need to look at how much time that's saved and then where we're going to allocate that resource. Because unfortunately,
yeah.
what happens is it just gets absorbed across the practice, and it's really, really easy to do. I've been
Mm,
there myself. So we need to be intentional when we are making these time savings. And I've developed a few sort of stage processes that practice can face in terms of like identifying how to uh, figure out where in the practice you need this, then how to implement it, and kind of looking into where and who in the practice we should be doing these things. When it comes to a person, the biggest mistake I see is just putting a blindfold on, spinning in the room and saying you. Like, that is the wrong way to go about it. It has to be somebody who has an interest in it, somebody who understands the opportunity and is excited by it, and also someone that has a bit of influence, someone that is
mm.
well liked in the office, who when they speak, people listen. Unfortunately, if it's not any of those things, you're not going to see results. And also holding people accountable. So if you do set somebody a challenge and say, right, let's sit down with the tax team. Where are there some gaps? Where are you doing a lot of manual processes that you hate doing? Now let's get the AI person in and let's speak to them. It'll probably be the same person as whoever's doing your tech. And now let's do some research into where we can help you.
I feel like one of the really major benefits of all this stuff is it seems to have blown open the accounting career path like wide open. There's so many things that you can go and now do and specialize in. Like back when I started, which was little bit earlier than when you did, as evidenced by the crayon and stuff
I
like
just die mindly, it's fine.
that. It was kind of, you go and qualify, maybe you work to become a partner, or if you want to become a VAT specialist, then you do that. But now you can do what you've done and kind of become a content creator and specialize in AI and just get really deep on a particular topic. Or you've got others that are building out tech consultancies and showing their clients how to deal with digital transformation, because that's a major pain point for the clients as well. It just sounds like that's making things really exciting, I think. But then also, by extension, that must allow firms to niche to a much higher degree as well, and become much more boutique firms, which I think some of them will have to do as you start seeing the mid-tier firms get acquired into these huge engines. I think if you want to stay small and independent, you've got to really specialize in something. I would have thought. What are you seeing on that side of things?
Yeah, well, we're seeing, I mean, the M&A market at the moment is just mad in the industry.
Yeah.
It's crazy how quickly firms are being acquired. And I think, to be honest, the AI revolution is kind of responsible for that, because there's a lot of practitioners that are thinking, do you know what? I'm hanging up my calculator. I don't need to be part of this. And I get it. I really do. But then there's also, and I remember when we was at DAS last, 2 weeks ago, and somebody asked the question of, I can't remember the age now, but it was like, how does a 72-year-old practitioner stay on board? And he was obviously very, very keen to do so, which is amazing. And actually, it showed that age wasn't a factor. If you've got the interest and you want to do this, fantastic, go with it. But what I would say is, the bigger practices have got that economies of scale, so they can create those
Mm,
efficiencies and they can make it a really smooth process for their clients. You're going to be in competition with them. Similarly, as a small practice, you're actually in competition with many, many other industries. We've got clients using Uber, Amazon, Netflix, everything where they get everything in an instant. So they're going to expect something very similar from you. So if they want access to how far you're getting on with their accounts, what their P&L was last month, even though we're 3 days after the year end, that's actually achievable. There should be a way that we can do that. So we need to get that foundation set before we start sort of advertising that we're an AI consultancy
yeah.
practice. But yeah, it's really, really exciting. And there is so many career opportunities now. And I just hope that people, whether they're coming into the profession or those that are already in the profession, get a chance to align the two together.
It's been a huge issue for a long time, hasn't it? Just that volume of people coming into the profession, and I know a lot of firms feel the pain of that.
Hmm.
Some even to the point where they've got work that they'd love to be able to go and do, or market or push out to clients, but they just don't have the capacity to fulfill it.
Yeah.
So hopefully things like this can, one, give them some capacity back, but also two, create, like you're saying, really interesting ways for people to find the profession really attractive again and just attract that talent into the space.
Yeah, and the
Um,
one thing I just want to add to that, sorry, is just
yeah,
that I would say the really exciting thing about the future and the reason why I think this is great and why I'm really on board with these people setting up digital technology transformation consultancy practices. We've got, as you say, content creators that are delivering all this message because they've been there, done that, got the t-shirt in practice. It seems to be different again. So if we go back to 10 years ago when people were trying to sell a software, it was initially very much salespeople selling software. Now, there's nothing against that, but when we were in practice, what would happen is they would kind of miss the mark a little bit, or they maybe wouldn't understand the pain of, oh, we'll just roll it out
mm,
to 1,000 clients. Not that simple. If you've been there and if you've been in practice and you understand the methodology of workflows that actually happen, it's really great that the people that are offering the advice have got some experience in it. So it's not coming from an uneducated place in that sense.
100%. Amazing. I know that you do much more than AI, but that's the sort of niche that you've carved out for yourself at the moment. So one more thing I want to ask is that um, you know substantially more about this stuff than me or a lot of other people in our space. So what's the one question that I haven't asked here that you think I should have asked? Like what's really important that's going on that people aren't necessarily thinking about as much?
That's a really good question. I would say it's around what products to use. And that's not for me
Okay.
to sit here and tell you exactly what products you should use. Unfortunately, I think because there is so much noise, nobody is actually giving you proper, here's a use case, do this, do that. And that's what I really
Yeah.
try and do with my content for that reason. But what I would say is when it comes to the products, a lot of people try something and it doesn't quite work in the way they want it to. And they say,
Mm,
it's not quite ready, let's leave it. It's not the same as that. What we need to do is we need to use it for what it can do. And then we're prepared for when those can'ts become cans. So in reference to some kind of the question that you haven't asked, I would say it would be around the software. And I'm getting some practices say, well, we're going to wait until our products incorporate it in because we feel safer that way. Absolutely fine. All on board for that. For those that want to be a bit more adventurous and maybe go and venture into like island products like your chat gpt, that's also fine. And my only advice would be beware of the free ones because if it's free, you are the
yeah.
product, and therefore your information is probably not very safe. So yeah, I think it's just around kind of how safe for you to use these things and where to channel your energy. And I would say whatever path you decide to take is fine, just as long as you start walking.
Absolutely. One last thing I want to ask you though, just a little bit of fun, is if anybody ever made a movie or a Netflix 4-part series on the accounting tech space, who would you want to play you in that?
Oh my gosh. Specifically the accounting tech space, I feel like it should be someone quite serious, but probably. Emma Stern is probably the one that I
Yeah,
would relate to the most. She's quite easygoing. She seems a bit of a tomboy, so I'm like, we've seen pretty similar, so she'd be great.
amazing. We'll add her to the cast list for you then. Billie, thank you
Thanks.
so much. Really, really appreciate your time for this. And if people want to connect with you, find out more about the work that you're doing, what is the best place for them to do that?
Amazing. Yeah. So if you just find me on LinkedIn on Billie McLaughlin, ACCA, and yes, you can see my weekly Friday Eye updates on there and any news or anything I come across. Feel free to message me as well because I love hearing everybody's use cases. Brag to me about your use cases. Tell me what's happening. I'd love to hear it.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Billie.
Thank you.